The stars looked peaceful through the viewing screen of the Endeavour. Captain Jacob Hayes stood on the bridge, watching the distant lights flicker in the darkness of space. He had seen this view 1,000 times before, and it never got old. Out here in the quiet reaches of the outer veil, everything seemed calm and perfect. "Captain, we're picking up something strange," Lieutenant Amy Carter said from her station. She was the tactical officer, though the word tactical meant something different now than it had in the old days. Her job was mostly about scanning for asteroids and monitoring ship systems. "It's a distress signal. Coming from Theta 7, Jacob frowned. Theta 7 was a mining colony, home to about 5,000 people. It was a peaceful place where families worked together to extract rare minerals from the planet's crust. "Put it through," he said. The signal crackled with static. A woman's voice came through, broken and desperate. "This is Theta 7, we are under attack. Unknown vessels. They're destroying everything. Please, someone help us." Then the signal went dead. Jacob felt his heart skip a beat. Attack, that word didn't make sense. The galaxy had been at peace for 300 years. The Galactic Coalition, which included Earth and 42 other species, had built a society based on cooperation and diplomacy. Violence was something from the history books, a dark chapter that everyone had agreed to leave behind. "Set course for Theta 7. Maximum speed," Jacob ordered. Dr. Peter Grant, the science officer, looked up from his console with worry in his eyes. Lisa Moore, the chief engineer, was already working to push the engines harder. The journey took 6 hours. 6 hours of silence on the bridge. 6 hours of wondering what they would find. Jacob had been a ship captain for 12 years, and he had never encountered anything like this. Pirates existed in some remote areas, but they were rare and usually just stole supplies. Actual violence was almost unheard of. When they arrived at Theta 7, Jacob wished they had stayed away. The colony was burning. Buildings that had stood for decades were now just smoking ruins. Bodies lay scattered across the main square. The mining equipment had been torn apart, and the landing pads were cratered and destroyed. In orbit above the planet, 3 massive ships hung in space like dark predators. They were unlike any coalition vessel Jacob had ever seen. Their hulls were black and covered with armor plating. Weapons bristled from every surface. "My God," Amy whispered. "What are those things?" Before Jacob could answer, one of the alien ships turned toward them. A face appeared on the viewing screen. It was reptilian, with dark scales and burning yellow eyes. Sharp teeth filled its mouth, and when it spoke, its voice was cold and filled with contempt. "You are weak," the creature said. "Your people died begging for mercy. There is no mercy in the universe. Only strength and weakness. You have chosen weakness, and who are you?" Jacob demanded. "Why did you attack these people?" "They never hurt anyone," the creature laughed. It was a terrible sound, like bones breaking. "I am Warlord Vexen of the Kresh Dominion. We take what we want. Your coalition is soft and pathetic. You will all burn." The screen went black. A moment later, energy weapons fired from the Kresh ship. The Endeavor's shields flared as the blast hit them. Alarms screamed across the bridge. "Return fire!" Amy shouted, but then she stopped. Her hands froze over the controls. "Captain, we don't have weapons. We're an exploration ship." Jacob's mind raced. Of course they didn't have weapons. No coalition ship did. Why would they need them? Evasive maneuvers. "Get us out of here!" Lisa worked frantically in engineering, rerouting power to the shields and engines. The Endeavour twisted and turned, trying to avoid the deadly energy blasts. Another hit struck them and the ship shook violently. Sparks flew from damaged consoles. "We can't take much more of this," Peter called out. "Shields are down to 30%. Jacob made a decision. "Take us down to the surface. Maybe we can lose them in the debris field." It was a desperate move, but they had no other choice. The Endeavour dropped into the atmosphere, engines screaming. The Kresh ships followed, firing continuously. Jacob guided the ship between the burning buildings of the colony, using them as cover. It was insane and dangerous, but it worked. The Kresh ships were larger and couldn't maneuver as easily. As they passed over the main square, Amy spotted something. "Captain, I'm reading life signs. There are survivors down there. Can we reach them? If we land near the eastern shelter, maybe. But we'll be exposed." Jacob didn't hesitate. "Do it!" The Endeavour set down hard, kicking up dust and ash. Jacob, Amy, and Peter ran down the loading ramp with emergency equipment. They found 12 people huddled in a reinforced shelter. Most were injured. All were terrified. Among them was Helen Price, the colony administrator. She had a deep cut across her forehead, and her hands were shaking. They came out of nowhere, Helen said as they helped her onto the ship. No warning. No communication. They just started shooting. We tried to talk to them, but they wouldn't listen. They killed anyone who tried to surrender. Back on the bridge, Lisa had the engines ready. We need to leave now, Captain. Those ships are coming back around. The Endeavour lifted off just as the Kresh opened fire again. The ship shuddered under the assault, but they made it to orbit. Jacob pushed the engines to their limit, and slowly, painfully, they left Theta 7 behind. The Kresh ships didn't follow. They had already taken what they wanted. The journey back to Coalition space was long and quiet. The survivors sat in the cargo bay dealing with their trauma. Jacob spent hours in his ready room trying to write a report. How did you explain something like this? How did you tell people that peace had just ended? When they finally reached the nearest Coalition station, Jacob immediately contacted Coalition Command. He expected shock and immediate action. Instead, he got confusion. You must be mistaken, Captain, the Viridian officer told him. Violence on this scale is not possible. Perhaps there was an accident, a malfunction of some kind. It wasn't an accident, Jacob said, trying to keep his voice calm. These Kresh, they're invaders. They have weapons. They're organized, and they're planning to attack more worlds. We will send a diplomatic team to investigate, the officer replied. I'm sure this can be resolved through dialogue. Jacob wanted to scream. You're not listening. They killed 5,000 people. They're not interested in talking. Every species is interested in peace, Captain. You just have to find the right approach. The conversation ended and Jacob was left standing alone in his quarters. He looked out at the stars, the same peaceful stars he had admired just days before, but now they looked different. Now they looked dangerous. Amy found him there an hour later. What do we do? She asked. Jacob was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, he finally said. The Coalition doesn't understand what's happening. They've forgotten that some problems can't be solved with words. So the Kresh will just keep attacking? Yes, Jacob said. Until someone stops them. But how? We don't have weapons. We don't have soldiers. We don't even know how to fight. Jacob thought about Earth, about humanity's history. Before joining the Coalition, humans had been warriors. They had fought terrible wars, learned hard lessons, and finally put all that violence behind them. All those old skills, all that knowledge had been locked away and forgotten. Maybe it was time to remember. I have an idea, Jacob said slowly, but people aren't going to like it. Amy looked at him, and in her eyes he saw the same determination he felt. If it saves lives, does it matter? Jacob didn't have an answer for that. Not yet, but he knew one thing for certain. The galaxy had changed. The long peace was over, and humanity, whether they liked it or not, was about to remember who they used to be. 3 weeks had passed since Theta 7, and the news was getting worse every day. 2 more colonies had gone silent. The Coalition Council had sent diplomatic envoys to make contact with the Kresh. The envoys never returned. Still, the Council insisted on patience and peaceful solutions. Jacob couldn't take it anymore. He sat in a small conference room on Earth, meeting with people he hoped would understand. Amy Carter was there, along with Peter Grant and Lisa Moore. They had all stayed with him even though their mission had officially ended. They knew something had to be done. The archives are deep underground, Jacob explained, pulling up a map on the display screen. Most people don't even remember they exist. After humanity joined the Coalition, we sealed away everything related to our military past. Weapons design, strategy books, war history, all of it. Peter looked uncomfortable. Captain, that information was sealed for a reason. We spent centuries learning to be peaceful. Going back to that, it feels wrong. 5,000 people died at Theta 7, Amy said quietly. How many more need to die before we admit that peace only works when everyone wants it? Lisa nodded. The Kresh don't want peace. They want conquest, and the Coalition has no idea how to stop them. Jacob stood up and paced the room. I know this is difficult. I know we all believe in the Coalition's principles. But principles won't save us from an enemy that doesn't share them. We need to learn how to defend ourselves. And if the Council finds out? Peter asked. Then they find out, Jacob said. I'd rather face their judgment than watch more innocent people die. The next day they entered the archives. The facility was old and dusty, maintained by automated systems that barely remembered their purpose. Jacob had needed special authorization just to get past the security doors. The woman who approved his request, an older official named Margaret Bell, had looked at him with sad eyes. "I hope you know what you're doing, Captain," she had said. "Once you open that door, you can't close it again." Now, standing in the massive underground chamber, Jacob understood what she meant. The archives stretched as far as he could see, filled with thousands of years of human history. But they were looking for something specific. "Military section should be in Corridor 9, Amy said, reading from a directory terminal. They walked through the quiet halls, their footsteps echoing. Finally, they found it. Rows and rows of data storage, physical books, and holographic records. Jacob picked up one of the books. The title read, "Infantry Tactics Through the Ages." He opened it carefully, and dust fell from the pages. "There's so much here," Lisa said, looking overwhelmed. "Battle strategies, weapons technology, training manuals. How do we even begin?" "We start with the basics," Jacob said. "We learn what war is. Then we learn how to fight it." They spent days in the archives reading and studying. Jacob focused on naval tactics, since they would be fighting in space. Amy studied weapon systems and targeting strategies. Peter, despite his doubts, dove into combat medicine and battlefield logistics. Lisa examined old military spacecraft and how they were designed differently from civilian vessels. The more they learned, the more they realized how unprepared the coalition was. Modern coalition ships had shields and engines, but no offensive capabilities. They were designed for exploration and transport, not combat. The Kresh ships, by contrast, were pure weapons of war. "We need to retrofit our ships," Lisa said one evening. "Add weapons, strengthen the hulls, improve the power systems." "I can do it, but I'll need resources and people who won't ask too many questions." "I know some engineers who might help," Jacob said. "People who are frustrated with the Council's inaction." Word spread quietly. Jacob wasn't the only one who had seen the Kresh threat for what it was. Other ship captains, engineers, and ordinary people began reaching out. They met in secret, sharing what they had learned. The group grew slowly but steadily. Danny White was a transport pilot who had narrowly escaped a Kresh raid. He was young, barely 30, but he had quick reflexes and a natural talent for maneuvering. "Teach me to fight," he told Jacob. "I won't run away next time." Karen Bell worked in communications for the coalition. She had been monitoring transmissions and noticed disturbing patterns. The Kresh were coordinating their attacks, gathering intelligence, preparing for something bigger. "I can help you track them," she offered. "Someone needs to." Chris Lane was a doctor who had treated survivors from the destroyed colonies. He had seen injuries that no modern physician was trained to handle. Injuries from weapons designed to kill. "If you're going to fight, you'll need medical support," he said simply. They found an abandoned facility on a distant moon. It had once been a research station but had been closed down decades ago. Lisa and her team of engineers worked around the clock to make it functional. They built training rooms, medical bays, and workshops for modifying ships. Jacob stood in the main hall of the facility and looked at the 200 people who had gathered there. They were scientists, pilots, engineers, and ordinary civilians. None of them were soldiers, but they were willing to learn. "I won't lie to you," Jacob told them. "What we're about to do goes against everything the coalition stands for. We're going to learn how to hurt people, how to destroy things, how to wage war. Some of you might not be able to handle it. Some of you might decide this is wrong, and that's okay. You can leave at any time." No one left. The training was harder than anyone expected. They started with basic physical fitness, which many of them lacked. Then came weapons training. Lisa's team had built simple energy rifles based on old military designs. The first time someone fired one, half the trainees flinched. Amy taught tactical thinking. "Stop assuming your enemy will be reasonable," she would say. "The Kresh want to win. They'll use every advantage, every trick, every moment of weakness. You have to think like them." Danny helped train pilots in combat maneuvers. "Forget everything you know about safe flying," he instructed. "In combat, safe means dead. You have to be unpredictable, aggressive, and fast." Jacob taught strategy and leadership. He used examples from human history. Ancient battles where smaller forces defeated larger ones through clever tactics. The Battle of Thermopylae, where 300 warriors held off thousands. The naval battles of the Second World War, where aircraft carriers changed everything. The guerrilla tactics that had won wars against superior enemies. It was strange reading about these conflicts. Humanity had spent so long trying to forget them, to move beyond violence. but now studying them felt necessary. These ancient warriors, with all their flaws and brutality, had understood something the modern galaxy had forgotten. Sometimes you had to fight to protect what you loved. Peter struggled the most. He was a scientist, a man dedicated to understanding and creating, not destroying. One night, Jacob found him sitting alone, staring at a medical text about treating combat wounds. "I became a doctor to save lives," Peter said quietly. "Now I'm learning how to patch people up so they can go back and kill more." "You're learning how to save lives under the worst conditions," Jacob replied. "That's still noble, Peter, maybe more noble than ever." "Is it, though?" "We're preparing for war. We're choosing violence," Jacob sat down beside him. "We're not choosing violence. The Kresh already made that choice. We're choosing to defend ourselves." "There's a difference." "Is there?" Peter asked. "Once we start down this path, how do we stop? How do we keep from becoming like the Kresh?" It was a question Jacob asked himself every day. "We remember why we're doing this," he said finally. "We're not fighting because we want to. We're fighting because people need protection. As long as we hold on to that, we'll be okay." After 3 months, they had 12 modified ships and 300 trained people. It wasn't much, but it was a start. They ran simulations, practiced maneuvers, and tested their weapons. The ships were clumsy compared to what the Kresh had, but they were functional. Then the call came. Jacob was in the command center when Karen rushed in, her face pale. "The Kresh are attacking New Avalon," she said. "They have a full battle fleet. 8 billion people, Jacob. 8 billion. New Avalon was one of the Coalition's core worlds. It was beautiful and prosperous, home to dozens of species living in harmony. If it fell, the entire Coalition would collapse into panic." "The Council is sending Ambassador Kelrin to negotiate," Karen continued. "They still think they can talk to them." Amy slammed her fist on the console. "They'll kill him, just like they killed the others." Jacob made his decision. "Prepare the fleet. We're going to New Avalon." "Jacob, we don't have authorization," Peter said. "If we do this, we'll be defying the Council directly." "I know," Jacob replied. "But I'm not going to stand by and watch 8 billion people die because the Council won't face reality." He activated the facility-wide communication system. "This is Captain Hayes. We have a situation. The Kresh are attacking New Avalon. I'm taking our fleet there to stop them. I know many of you have doubts. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But those people need us. They need someone willing to stand between them and destruction. So if you're with me, get to your ships. If not, I understand. No judgment." Every single person headed for their ship. As the fleet prepared to launch, Jacob stood on the bridge of the Endeavor and looked at his crew. Amy at tactical, Lisa in engineering, Peter at medical. The journey to New Avalon took 8 hours. 8 hours for Jacob to second-guess everything. 8 hours to wonder if he was leading his people to their deaths. 8 hours to prepare for something no one in the Coalition had done in 3 centuries. When they dropped out of faster-than-light speed, the sight took his breath away. New Avalon hung in space like a blue and green jewel. Its 3 moons orbited peacefully, and hundreds of civilian ships moved in standard traffic patterns around it. Everything looked normal, peaceful, safe. Then Jacob saw the Kresh Armada on the far side of the planet. 80 warships arranged in a massive attack formation. They were unlike anything in the Coalition fleet. Dark, angular, covered in weapons. They looked like what they were. Instruments of destruction. "My God," Danny whispered from the helm. "There are so many." Amy was already scanning them. "I count 82 capital ships plus smaller support craft. They've got energy cannons, missile systems, and some kind of plasma weapon I've never seen before." "And we have 12 ships," Peter said quietly. Jacob stood up straight. 12 ships with trained crews who know what they're doing. "Position us between the Kresh and the planet. Standard defensive formation Alpha." The human fleet moved into position, forming a protective line. On paper, it looked insane. 12 ships against 80. But Jacob had studied the old battles, the impossible victories won by smaller forces who refused to give up. Karen's console lit up. "Captain, Ambassador Kelrin is broadcasting to the Kresh. He's asking for peaceful negotiations." "Put it through." They watched as the elderly Viridian ambassador appeared on screen. Speaking in his calm, measured voice, he talked about cooperation, mutual understanding, and the benefits of joining the Coalition. He offered trade agreements, technology sharing, and friendship. The Kresh response came quickly. Warlord Vexen's face filled the screen, his yellow eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. "Your words are meaningless," he said. "Weakness disguised as wisdom. We have heard enough." The transmission cut off. A moment later, energy beams lanced out from the Kresh fleet. They struck Ambassador Kelrin's ship, vaporizing it in an instant. The elderly Viridian who had dedicated his life to peace died without even understanding why. Jacob felt rage burn through him. "Open a channel to the Kresh fleet." Warlord Vexen appeared again, now looking at Jacob. "Ah, the humans. We remember you from Theta 7. You ran away like frightened children. Have you come back to beg for mercy?" "No," Jacob said, his voice hard. "We've come to stop you," Vexen laughed. "You? 12 primitive ships against our armada? Your civilization has grown soft and weak. You don't even remember how to fight." Jacob allowed himself a small smile. "You'd be surprised what we remember." He cut the transmission and turned to Amy. "Weapons free. Target the lead ships in their formation. Danny, prepare for evasive pattern Theta." "Pattern Theta, aye," Danny replied, his hands steady on the controls despite the fear in his eyes. The Kresh fleet began moving forward. They came slowly, confidently, like predators stalking prey. Jacob waited, watching their formation, counting ships, calculating distances. He had studied ancient naval tactics, battles fought on Earth's oceans centuries ago. The principles were the same. "They're splitting into 3 groups," Amy reported, "trying to surround us." "Let them," Jacob said. "They think we're stupid. Show them we're not." All ships attack formation. Focus fire on the left flank. Maximum intensity. The 12 human ships broke formation and accelerated hard. The Kresh had expected them to sit and defend. Instead, the humans charged directly at one section of the enemy fleet. It was aggressive, unexpected, and it worked. The human ships opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams and missiles streaked across space, slamming into 3 Kresh cruisers. Lisa had done her work well. The modified weapons hit hard and the Kresh shields buckled under the concentrated assault. "Direct hits," Amy called out. 2 Kresh ships damaged, 1 disabled. But the Kresh were already responding. Return fire lit up the darkness of space. The human ships scattered, using the evasive maneuvers Danny and the other pilots had practiced for months. They twisted and dove, never staying in one place, making themselves difficult targets. The Endeavor shook as a Kresh energy beam glanced off their shields. Alarms blared, but Lisa's voice came through clear and calm. "Shields holding at 70%. We can take a few more hits like that." Jacob watched the tactical display, seeing the battle unfold. The Kresh were powerful but predictable. They fought like they always had, using overwhelming force and direct assaults. They had never faced an enemy that used strategy and deception. "Danny, take us into that debris field from the ambassador's ship. Use it as cover." "That's crazy, Captain. The debris is still hot. That's why they won't follow us." "Do it." The Endeavor plunged into the cloud of wreckage. Pieces of hull scraped against their shields, but they emerged on the other side behind a group of Kresh ships. Before the enemy could react, Amy fired, hitting them from their unprotected rear. Across the battlefield, the other human ships were doing the same thing. They attacked in pairs, supporting each other, covering weaknesses. When one ship drew fire, another would strike from a different angle. They fought like a pack of wolves against larger prey. Karen was monitoring Kresh communications. "Captain, they're confused. Their commanders are arguing with each other. They don't understand our tactics." "Good," Jacob said. "Keep them confused. All ships, form up for Maneuver 7. Maneuver 7 was something Jacob had found in an old book about space combat theory. It had never been tested in real battle, but the principle was sound. The human ships formed a tight group and flew straight at the Kresh flagship, where Warlord Vexen commanded. The Kresh concentrated their fire, thinking they had the humans trapped. At the last moment, the human ships split apart, diving above and below the flagship in a move that looked suicidal. The Kresh ships behind the flagship couldn't stop firing in time. Their own weapons struck their flagship, damaging it severely. "It worked," Peter shouted, watching from his medical station. "They hit their own ship." Jacob allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. But the battle was far from over. They had disabled 6 Kresh ships and damaged a dozen more, but they still faced overwhelming odds, and the Kresh were starting to adapt. "Captain, 3 enemy cruisers are moving to surround us," Amy warned. Jacob looked at the tactical display. The Kresh were using better coordination now, trying to trap individual human ships. He needed something to disrupt their formation again. Danny, take us toward New Avalon. Fast. Toward the planet? Why? Trust me. The Endeavor accelerated toward New Avalon and the 3 Kresh cruisers followed. Jacob watched the numbers carefully, calculating gravity wells and orbital mechanics. Just as they entered the planet's upper atmosphere, he gave the command. Full power to engines. Slingshot maneuver now! Danny understood instantly. He used New Avalon's gravity to whip the Endeavor around in a tight arc, gaining speed and reversing direction. The 3 Kresh cruisers, heavier and less maneuverable, couldn't follow. They found themselves facing the planet's gravity well, with their momentum carrying them forward. 2 of the cruisers managed to pull away. The third wasn't fast enough. It began falling toward the planet, its engines screaming as it tried to escape. Eventually it managed to climb back to orbit, but it was out of the fight. The battle raged for 8 hours. 8 hours of constant movement, of desperate maneuvers, of split-second decisions. Jacob's crew was exhausted, running on adrenaline and determination. The Endeavor's shields were down to 20%. Several systems were damaged, but they were still fighting. The other human ships had taken damage too. 3 ships were severely damaged and had pulled back. 1 ship, the Liberty commanded by Captain Paul Hayes, no relation to Jacob, had been destroyed. Everyone aboard had died, but they had taken 2 Kresh ships with them. Yet slowly, impossibly, the tide was turning. The Kresh had lost 41 ships. Their formation was broken, their coordination shattered. Warlord Vexen's flagship was crippled, floating dead in space. The remaining Kresh ships were no longer attacking. They were trying to survive. Jacob was about to order another assault when Karen grabbed his arm. Captain, the flagship. Someone's transmitted a distress signal from inside. They're asking for help. Kresh asking for help? No, sir. Coalition species. They were prisoners. Jacob made a decision instantly. Tell Danny to put us alongside that flagship. Amy, get a boarding team ready. We're going in. Peter stared at him. You want to board an enemy ship? In the middle of a battle? They have prisoners. We're getting them out. Karen led the boarding team. She took 5 others, all armed with the simple energy rifles Lisa's team had built. They cut through the flagship's hull and entered carefully. The interior was dark and filled with smoke. Kresh bodies lay everywhere, killed when the ship lost power. They found the prisoners in a cargo hold, 20 beings from various coalition species held in cages like animals. Karen and her team got them out and back to the Endeavor as quickly as possible. One of the rescued prisoners was a young Threxian female named Zex. She looked at Karen with confusion and wonder. You're humans, she said, but you fight. I thought humans were peaceful. Karen helped her to the medical bay. We were, she said quietly. The news of the Battle of New Avalon spread across the galaxy in hours. 8 billion people had been saved by 12 human ships. The impossible had happened. The coalition, which had spent 3 centuries believing war was obsolete, suddenly had to face a harsh truth. Violence still existed in the universe, and they had no defense against it. Jacob and his crew returned to Earth as heroes to some and criminals to others. The Coalition Council was deeply divided. Some species, particularly those who had lost colonies to the Kresh, praised the humans for their courage. Others were horrified that anyone would resort to violence, even in defense. Jacob was summoned to appear before the council. He stood in the great chamber on Sanctum, the Coalition capital world, facing representatives from 43 different species. The chamber was beautiful, designed to inspire thoughts of unity and cooperation. Jacob had always admired it. Now it felt like he was on trial. Council Speaker Thalen, the elderly Viridian leader, looked down at Jacob with sad, tired eyes. Captain Hayes, you have put us in a difficult position. You acted without authorization. You resurrected military technology that we had agreed to leave in the past. You engaged in organized violence. These actions go against the very foundation of what the Coalition represents. Jacob stood straight and calm. With respect, Speaker, the Kresh were about to destroy New Avalon. Your diplomatic envoy was killed. 8 billion people would have died if someone hadn't acted. Perhaps, Thalen replied. But by fighting, you have validated the Kresh belief that strength is all that matters. You have proven them right. No, Jacob said firmly. I proved that we can defend ourselves. There's a difference between being peaceful and being helpless. The chamber erupted into argument. Some council members agreed with Jacob. Others demanded he be arrested. The debate went on for hours, but in the end, the council made a compromise. Jacob would not be punished, but his actions would not be officially endorsed either. The coalition would neither condemn nor celebrate what the humans had done. It was a political answer that solved nothing. But then Council Member Drax, a Threxian representative whose colony had been destroyed by the Kresh, stood up. His insect-like features were hard to read, but his voice was clear. I propose we establish a coalition defense force. Not for aggression, but for protection. Captain Hayes has shown us that defense is possible. We would be fools to ignore this lesson. The proposal sparked another heated debate. Some species refused to participate in anything military. Others eagerly volunteered. Eventually, after weeks of discussion, the council approved the creation of the Coalition Defense Force. Jacob was appointed as its first supreme commander, a title that made him uncomfortable. I'm not a general, he told Amy when he heard the news. I'm just a ship captain who read some old books. You're the only one who knows how to do this, Amy replied. Like it or not, you're the person we need. Setting up the defense force was harder than fighting the battle had been. Jacob had to find a base, recruit trainers, design a training program, and somehow teach beings from dozens of different species how to fight. Many species had never even conceived of violence. Teaching them was like teaching fish to climb trees. The training facility was established on a moon called Garrison Prime. It was remote enough to avoid attention, but close enough to major trade routes. Jacob brought in his core team. Amy became head of tactical training. Lisa oversaw ship modifications and engineering. Peter ran the medical division. Danny trained pilots. Karen handled intelligence and communications. Chris set up field hospitals. Volunteers came slowly at first. Many were humans who had watched the Battle of New Avalon and wanted to help. But gradually, members of other species began arriving too. They came from colonies that had been attacked, from families who had lost loved ones, from people who understood that the galaxy had changed. Among the first non-human recruits was Zex. The young Threxian female Karen had rescued from the Kresh flagship. She had insisted on joining despite having no combat experience. You saved my life, she told Jacob. Now I want to help save others. The Threxians adapted to military training quickly. Their insect-like bodies were naturally armored and they had excellent spatial awareness. They made exceptional soldiers. But other species struggled. The Luminians were philosophical beings who spent their lives in meditation and art. Teaching them to use weapons felt wrong to everyone involved. Many of them couldn't handle the stress of combat training and had to leave, but a few stayed, determined to contribute somehow. One of them was a Luminian named Solace. He couldn't bring himself to fire a weapon, but he had other skills. I can sense emotions, he explained to Jacob. I can tell when someone is lying or afraid. Perhaps I can help with intelligence work. Jacob assigned him to work with Karen. Together, they became remarkably effective at analyzing Kresh communications and predicting enemy movements. As the training continued, Jacob faced criticism from Earth itself. A peace movement had formed, led by a politician named Richard Cole. He gave passionate speeches about how humanity was betraying its principles, returning to its violent past and leading the galaxy down a dark path. We spent 300 years learning to be better, Cole said in one broadcast that millions watched. Now Captain Hayes wants to throw all that away. He wants to turn us back into warriors, into killers. Is that really who we want to be? The movement gained supporters. Protests formed on Earth and other human colonies. People carried signs saying, "Peace, not war, and remember our history, don't repeat it." Jacob tried to ignore them, but it was hard. Part of him agreed with them. Late one night, Jacob found himself sitting alone in his office, staring at old photographs from Earth's violent past. Wars that had killed millions, weapons that could destroy entire cities, hatred and fear that had nearly ended humanity. Cole was right. This was their history. This was what they had left behind. Lisa found him there. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "How can I?" Jacob replied. "I'm teaching people to kill. Cole says I'm betraying everything humanity stands for. Maybe he's right." Lisa sat down across from him. "Do you remember what you told Peter after Theta 7? About the difference between choosing violence and choosing to defend yourself?" "Yes. That difference still matters, Jacob. We're not building an army to conquer. We're building one to protect. As long as you remember that, you're not betraying anything. But what happens after the Kresh are gone? What if we can't go back to being peaceful? What if we start looking for enemies everywhere? Lisa was quiet for a moment. That's a risk, she admitted. But you know what's not a risk? What happens if we don't defend ourselves? The creche won't stop until they've conquered everyone. And then there won't be anyone left to worry about peace or violence or anything else. Jacob nodded slowly. She was right. But it didn't make the choice any easier. 6 months after the Battle of New Avalon, the Coalition Defense Force had 80 ships and 5,000 trained personnel. It wasn't enough, not really, but it was progress. The ships were better designed now with proper weapons and armor. The crew members were better trained, more confident. They weren't soldiers yet, but they were learning. Then Karen came running into Jacob's office with urgent news. The creche are coming, she said. A massive fleet. Over 300 ships. They're heading straight for Sanctum. Jacob felt his blood run cold. Sanctum was the Coalition capital, home to the Council and billions of people. It was the heart of everything they had built. How long? 72 hours. 3 days to prepare for the largest battle in Coalition history. 3 days to defend everything they believed in. Jacob called together his senior staff. Everyone looked worried but determined. We have 80 ships against 300, he said. We're outnumbered almost 4 to 1. The creche have learned from New Avalon. They'll be ready for our tactics this time. So what do we do? Danny asked. Jacob pulled up a tactical map. We do what humans have always done when facing impossible odds. We use every advantage we have. Intelligence, strategy, creativity, and the willingness to take risks. Amy leaned forward. You have a plan? The beginning of one, Jacob admitted. But I need everyone's help to make it work. They spent the next 72 hours preparing. Ships were positioned. Traps were set. Every crew member was briefed on their role. Jacob barely slept, running simulations and adjusting plans. On the final night before the creche arrived, Jacob walked through the base on Garrison Prime. He saw young recruits preparing their equipment, their hands shaking slightly. He saw veterans from the Battle of New Avalon, grim-faced but ready. He saw members of different species working together, united by a common cause. Greg Stone, one of the best infantry commanders they had trained, approached him. The former athlete had become a natural leader, inspiring his troops with confidence and dedication. Captain, I want you to know something. Whatever happens tomorrow, we're proud to serve with you. You taught us that being peaceful doesn't mean being weak. That's a lesson worth fighting for. Jacob shook his hand. I'm proud of all of you, too. We've come a long way from that first day in the archives. Do you think we can win? Jacob looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the creche armada was approaching. 300 warships filled with warriors who had never... The Battle of Sanctum began at dawn, though in space dawn was just a concept. The creche fleet moved forward like a dark tide, their 300 warships filling the screens with threat and power. Supreme Warlord Kravis had positioned them perfectly, using overlapping formations that protected their flanks and concentrated their firepower. Jacob watched from the Endeavor's bridge. His 80 ships looked tiny compared to the creche armada, but he had learned something important over the past months. Numbers weren't everything. Strategy, courage, and the willingness to sacrifice could overcome even terrible odds. Karen, how's their formation? He asked. Karen studied her displays. Tight and disciplined. They've learned from New Avalon. No gaps, no weaknesses we can exploit easily. Then we'll create weaknesses, Jacob said. He opened the command channel. All ships execute Plan Omega. May the stars watch over us. Plan Omega was the most dangerous strategy Jacob had ever conceived. It required splitting his small fleet into even smaller groups, making them look vulnerable and scattered. The creche would see easy targets and break formation to attack them. That's when the real plan would begin. The Defense Force ships split apart, moving in different directions. Some headed toward Sanctum's moons. Others dove below the orbital plane. A few seemed to be running away entirely. Kravis took the bait. They're cowards, after all, he announced to his fleet. Split into hunting groups. Destroy them one by one. The creche formation broke apart. Groups of ships peeled off to chase the seemingly fleeing Defense Force vessels. It was exactly what Jacob had hoped for. Now, he whispered. The Defense Force ships that had fled to the moon suddenly reversed course. Hidden among the moons were automated weapons platforms that Lisa's engineers had built in secret. They activated simultaneously, catching the pursuing creche ships in crossfire. Below the orbital plane, Danny led a squadron in a tight spiral, luring crash ships into a navigation hazard field that the Coalition had marked but never cleared. The crash focused on their prey flew right into it. Debris from old satellites and space junk tore through their shields. The ships that had appeared to run away suddenly stopped and turned, forming a defensive wall around civilian evacuation vessels. When the crash arrived expecting easy kills, they found themselves facing prepared defensive positions. But the crash were learning too. Kravis quickly understood the trap and adjusted. "Ignore the small groups," he ordered. "Reform the main fleet. We'll crush their capital ships first." The crash began pulling back together, but those precious few minutes had cost them. 15 of their ships were destroyed or disabled. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Now came the real test. Jacob positioned the Endeavor at the head of his main battle group. 30 ships, including the largest and most powerful ones they had. They faced over 200 crash vessels that had reformed into a massive attack wall. Amy's hands moved quickly over her console. "Captain, they're charging their main weapons. If they fire all at once, our shields won't hold." "I know," Jacob said. "That's why we're not going to be here when they fire." "Danny, full acceleration directly at them." Danny's eyes widened. "At them? You want to charge their main line?" "Yes, trust me." The Endeavor and its battle group accelerated to maximum speed, heading straight for the crash wall. It looked like suicide. The crash held their fire, waiting for the perfect moment when the human ships would be too close to dodge. 3 seconds to firing range. Amy counted down. 2, 1, now, Jacob shouted. Every human ship activated their emergency thrusters simultaneously, diving below the crash firing line at the last possible instant. The crash weapons fired but hit empty space. The energy beams meant for the human ships struck the second line of crash vessels behind them instead. Chaos erupted in the crash formation as they accidentally damaged their own ships. In that moment of confusion, the human ships came up underneath them, firing at their vulnerable lower hulls. "Direct hits," Amy reported. Multiple crash ships taking critical damage. But the victory was brief. Kravis was furious now, and fury made him more dangerous. He concentrated his entire remaining fleet, over 180 ships in a tight sphere formation. "No more games," he broadcast. "We will crush you with pure strength." The crash sphere began tightening with the human ships at the center. It was a tactic designed to overwhelm through sheer firepower. Every crash ship could fire inward, while the human ships had nowhere to run. "Captain, we're surrounded," Peter called from medical. "We can't outmaneuver this many ships." Jacob studied the tactical display. Peter was right. This was exactly what he had feared. The crash had learned their lessons and adapted. Clever tactics only went so far against overwhelming numbers. The Endeavor shook as multiple energy beams struck the shields. Alarms blared across every deck. Other human ships were taking heavy damage too. Through the viewing screen, Jacob saw the ship called Freedom break apart under concentrated fire. 50 crew members died in an instant. Then the Valiant took critical damage, its engines exploding. That was another 40 people gone. "Shields at 30%, Lisa reported, her voice strained. "We can't take much more, Jacob." Jacob felt desperation rising in his chest. They had come so far, fought so hard. But maybe it wasn't enough. Maybe Cole had been right, and this was all just a futile gesture that would end in tragedy. Then he remembered something Greg Stone had said the night before. Being peaceful doesn't mean being weak. That was true. But there was something else, something deeper. Being willing to fight didn't make you a warrior. Being willing to sacrifice made you human. Jacob made his decision. "All ships, this is Captain Hayes. I'm going to try something. It's going to look bad. Don't try to save me. Focus on protecting the evacuation ships and getting people to safety." "Jacob, what are you doing?" Amy asked, alarm in her voice. "What needs to be done?" He opened a direct channel to the crash flagship. Kravis's scarred face appeared on screen. "Have you called to beg for mercy, human?" "No," Jacob said. "I called to tell you something. You're right that the Coalition was weak. We forgot that sometimes peace has to be defended. But you're wrong about what makes someone strong. Strength isn't about conquering others. It's about protecting them, even when it costs everything." "Meaningless words from a dying man," Kravis sneered. "Maybe," Jacob agreed, "but I'll die knowing I tried to save people." "What will you die knowing, Kravis?" He cut the transmission and turned to his crew. "I need everyone to evacuate to the escape pods now." "What?" Amy stood up. "No, we're not abandoning ship." That's an order, Lieutenant. I don't care if it's an order. Amy was crying now. You can't do this alone. Lisa came onto the bridge, having left engineering. Whatever you're planning, we're staying. We've been with you from the beginning. We'll be here at the end, too. Jacob looked at his crew. Amy, Lisa, Peter, Danny, Karen, Chris. They had become more than just colleagues. They were his family, and they were refusing to leave him. I'm going to ram the flagship, Jacob explained quietly. Full speed right into Kravis's command center. It might not destroy them, but it will break their formation. Give the rest of our fleet a chance. Then we'll do it together, Danny said simply. Before Jacob could argue, Karen interrupted. Captain, I'm getting readings from all across the battlefield. Other ships are breaking formation. They're moving toward us. What? Who? Everyone, Karen said, wonder in her voice. The other Defense Force ships. They're all coming to us. Jacob pulled up the tactical display and saw it was true. Every remaining human ship was abandoning their positions and racing toward the Endeavor. But it wasn't just human ships. Threxian vessels were coming too. Viridian ships. Even the few Luminian ships that had joined the Defense Force, what are they doing? Peter asked. The answer came over the command channel. It was Nicole, one of the fighter pilots Jacob had trained. Sir, we heard what you said to Kravis. About protecting people even when it costs everything. Well, you protected all of us. You taught us how to be strong. Now it's our turn to protect you. Another voice joined in. It was Zex, the young Threxian. You saved my life once, Captain Hayes. Every being in the Defense Force is here because you gave them hope. We won't let you sacrifice yourself alone. More voices added their agreement. Hundreds of crew members from dozens of ships all saying the same thing. They were with him. All of them. Jacob felt tears in his eyes. He had been so focused on teaching them to fight that he hadn't realized he had taught them something more important. He had taught them what it meant to stand together. All ships, Jacob said, his voice thick with emotion. If you're coming with me, form up. We're going to show Kravis what the Coalition really is. The Defense Force ships formed a spearhead formation with the Endeavor at the point. They accelerated together, building speed, heading directly for Kravis's flagship. It wasn't suicide anymore. It was a statement. Kravis saw them coming and laughed. Fools, you think bravery will save you? I'll destroy you all. His ships opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams and missiles filled space. The Defense Force shields flared and failed. The ship Justice exploded. The Courageous was hit and tumbled away, burning. Good people were dying, but they kept coming. Then something unexpected happened. Ships began moving behind the Defense Force charge.